The gunshot echoing through the small town of Silver Creek, Wyoming made Katherine Fletcher flinch, even though she was safely inside the modest room she rented above the general store. It was 1878, and she had spent the last 6 months in this dusty frontier town trying to outrun her past, knowing full well that whispers and rumors traveled faster than any stagecoach. Katherine glanced at her reflection in the small, cracked mirror hanging on the wall. At 24, her features had hardened slightly from the innocent girl who had left St. Louis 2 years ago. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her green eyes carried a wariness that hadn't been there before. She adjusted the high collar of her modest dress, a far cry from the garments she'd worn during her darkest days. The sound of footsteps on the wooden stairs made her turn. Mrs. Abernathy, the shopkeeper's wife and landlady, appeared in the doorway with a letter in hand. "This came for you on today's post," the older woman said, her voice tinged with the same suspicion that had colored every interaction since Katherine's arrival. "Thank you," Katherine replied, accepting the envelope. Mrs. Abernathy lingered, her eyes roaming over Katherine's sparse room. "My husband and I were discussing your rent." Katherine's stomach tightened. "I've paid on time every month." "Yes, well, we're considering raising it. Times are hard." The words were a thin veil for the truth. Someone had recognized her, or perhaps a letter had arrived from back east. Either way, her past had caught up to her once again. "I understand," Katherine said quietly. After Mrs. Abernathy left, Katherine sank onto her bed, tearing open the letter. It was from her only friend in St. Louis, warning her that a former client had been asking questions about her whereabouts. Katherine closed her eyes, feeling the walls closing in yet again. She had come west to escape the shame of having worked in a high-end brothel after being abandoned by a man who had promised marriage. The stigma followed her everywhere, forcing her to move from town to town whenever someone discovered her past. 2 days later, Katherine stood at the edge of town with her single carpetbag, watching as the stagecoach disappeared into the distance. She had declined to board, knowing her meager savings wouldn't take her far. Instead, she had decided to walk to the next town, hoping to find work before winter set in. The October air carried a sharp chill as she trudged along the dusty road, her threadbare coat providing little protection against the wind. After several miles, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her step to the side of the road, head bowed to avoid eye contact with whoever was passing. "Madam, are you walking all the way to Clearwater?" A deep voice called out. Katherine glanced up to see a tall man atop a chestnut stallion. His face was partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out a strong jaw dusted with stubble and piercing blue eyes. "I am," she replied cautiously. "That's 15 miles and there's a storm brewing." He nodded toward the darkening sky to the west. "I'm heading to my ranch just outside Clearwater. I'd be happy to give you a ride." Every instinct told Katherine to refuse. Men didn't offer help without expecting something in return. That was a lesson she'd learned the hard way. But the distant rumble of thunder made the decision for her. "Thank you, sir. I would appreciate that." He dismounted in one fluid motion and extended his hand. "Owen Montgomery." "Most folks just call me Montgomery." "Katherine Fletcher," she replied, hesitating before placing her hand in his. His grip was firm but gentle as he helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her with practiced ease. Katherine sat rigidly, uncomfortable with the proximity to a stranger. "Relax, Miss Fletcher. I promise you're safe with me," he said, his voice carrying a note of understanding that surprised her. They rode in silence for several minutes before Owen spoke again. "What brings you to these parts? Not many women travel alone through this territory." "I'm seeking work," she replied vaguely. "What kind of work do you do?" Katherine hesitated. In the past 2 years, she had worked as a laundress, a dishwasher, and briefly as a schoolteacher before someone discovered her history. "I can cook, clean, so I'm not afraid of hard work." Owen nodded. "As it happens, my housekeeper just left to care for her ailing mother in Denver. My ranch hands are about to mutiny over my cooking. Before Katherine could respond, the skies opened up, drenching them in seconds. Owen urged his horse into a gallop, one arm wrapping protectively around Katherine's waist as they raced toward shelter. 20 minutes later, they reached a modest but well-built ranch house. A barn and several outbuildings dotted the property, and in the distance, Katherine could see cattle grazing on vast pastureland. "Welcome to the Lazy M," Owen said as he helped her down from the horse. "Let's get you inside and dried off." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly tidy for a bachelor's home. A large fireplace dominated the main room, with comfortable-looking furniture arranged around it. Owen quickly built up the fire and disappeared into another room, returning with a blanket and a set of dry clothes. "These belonged to my sister when she visited last year," he explained, handing them to Katherine. "There's a room just down the hall where you can change." When Katherine emerged in the borrowed dress, Owen had prepared coffee and set out bread and cheese on the kitchen table. "So, Miss Fletcher," he said as they sat across from each other, "would you consider taking on the position of housekeeper here? Room and board plus wages, of course." Katherine studied him cautiously. He appeared to be in his early 30s, his face weathered by sun and wind but handsome in a rugged way. There was no ring on his finger, and nothing in his manner suggested anything untoward. "Why would you hire someone you just met on the road?" Owen's mouth quirked up at one corner. "Let's just say I'm a good judge of character. Besides, I'm desperate. Last week I nearly poisoned my foreman with my biscuits." Despite herself, Katherine smiled. "I would need to know what the job entails exactly." "Cooking for me and occasionally for my 5 ranch hands, keeping the house in order, mending as needed. You'd have Sundays to yourself and your own private room in the house." He paused. "If it doesn't work out, I'll personally take you to Clearwater or wherever you'd like to go." The offer was more generous than anything Katherine had expected to find. Still, experience had taught her caution. "I'll accept on a trial basis," she said finally. 2 weeks and then we can both decide." Owen nodded, extending his hand across the table. "Welcome to the Lazy M, Miss Fletcher." The following days fell into a comfortable routine. Katherine rose early to prepare breakfast for Owen and his ranch hands, cleaned the house, washed clothes, and prepared the other meals. Owen was often out on the range during the day, returning tired but always taking time to thank her for her work. The ranch hands Bill, Hank, Jasper, Tom, and a young Mexican cowboy named Miguel were respectful, removing their hats when speaking to her and appreciating her cooking with almost comical enthusiasm. "Miss Fletcher, these are the best beans I've had since leaving my mama's kitchen in Texas," Hank declared one evening, helping himself to a 3rd serving. "She's an angel sent from heaven," Tom agreed, mopping up gravy with a biscuit. Katherine found herself smiling more frequently than she had in years. For the first time since leaving St. Louis, she felt a sense of purpose and, dare she admit it, belonging. A week into her stay, she was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when Owen approached, leading his horse. "I'm riding out to check the north pasture," he said. "Thought you might like to come along, see more of the ranch." Katherine hesitated, glancing at her half-finished chores. "The sheets can wait," Owen said with a smile. "It's a beautiful day and you've been working non-stop since you arrived." To her own surprise, Katherine found herself agreeing. Owen helped her mount his horse before climbing up behind her, and they set off across the rolling landscape. The vastness of the ranch took Katherine's breath away. Herds of cattle grazed peacefully, and in the distance, snow-capped mountains pierced the azure sky. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "Most beautiful land in Wyoming," Owen agreed, pride evident in his voice. "My father claimed this plot 20 years ago when there was nothing but wild prairie. Built it up from nothing. Where is your family now?" Owen was quiet for a moment. "Pa died 3 years ago. Ma couldn't bear to stay after that, so she went back east to live with my sister in Boston. I'm all that's left here now." The loneliness in his voice resonated with Katherine. "I'm sorry." Don't be. Pa lived the life he wanted, and he left me something to be proud of. Owen guided the horse toward a creek that wound through a grove of cottonwood trees. This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch. They dismounted, and Owen led the horse to drink while Katherine took in the peaceful scene. The water burbled over smooth stones, and birds called from the trees overhead. "What about you, Miss Fletcher?" Owen asked as he joined her on a fallen log. "Where's your family?" Katherine stiffened slightly. She had been waiting for the questions to come but had begun to hope they wouldn't. "I don't have any. My parents died when I was 16. There was an uncle in St. Louis, but he wasn't kind." Owen nodded, seeming to understand she didn't want to elaborate. "And what brought you all the way out here to Wyoming?" Katherine looked away, watching the creek water flow past. "A fresh start." "Everyone deserves one of those," Owen said simply. They sat in companionable silence for a while before heading back to the ranch house. When they arrived, Katherine found herself reluctant for the outing to end. "Thank you for showing me the creek," she said as Owen helped her down from the horse. "My pleasure, Miss Fletcher." He held her gaze a moment longer than necessary. "You know, you have the prettiest smile I've seen in these parts. You should use it more often." Katherine felt her cheeks warm, and she quickly excused herself to finish the laundry, Owen's words echoing in her mind. The 2-week trial period came and went without either of them mentioning it. As October gave way to November, Katherine settled into life at the Lazy M, finding contentment in the steady rhythm of ranch life. One evening, as she was preparing dinner, Miguel burst into the kitchen, his young face etched with concern. "Miss Fletcher, Mr. Montgomery's been hurt." "The men are bringing him in now." Katherine's heart lurched as she hurried outside. 4 ranch hands were carrying Owen toward the house, his face pale beneath his tan. "What happened?" she demanded. "Horse spooked and threw him," Bill explained grimly. "He landed hard on some rocks. Might have cracked some ribs." They brought Owen to his bedroom, where Katherine took charge, sending Hank to fetch the doctor from Clearwater while she examined Owen's injuries. "I'm fine," Owen protested weakly as she unbuttoned his shirt to reveal angry bruising spreading across his left side. "You most certainly are not," Katherine replied, her hands gentle despite her firm tone. She had tended to injured men before, though in very different circumstances. "You need to lie still until the doctor arrives." Owen grimaced in pain but managed a smile. "Yes, madam." Dr. Harris arrived 2 hours later, confirming that Owen had 3 cracked ribs but was otherwise fortunate. "Keep him in bed for at least a week," the doctor instructed Katherine. "Make sure he doesn't exert himself." The next few days were a trial for both Katherine and Owen. Used to being active from dawn till dusk, Owen made a terrible patient, constantly attempting to get up and check on ranch operations. "Mr. Montgomery, if you don't stay in that bed, I swear I'll tie you to it," Katherine threatened on the 3rd day after finding him attempting to dress. Owen grinned, despite the pain evident in his eyes. "You know, you're the only person I've met who's as stubborn as I am." Katherine placed her hands on her hips. "Someone has to be to keep you from killing yourself through sheer bullheadedness." To her surprise, Owen reached out and caught her hand. "Thank you for taking care of me, Katherine." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected thrill through her. "You're welcome," she replied softly, before gently extracting her hand and busying herself with straightening his bedcovers. As November progressed, Owen gradually recovered, though he still winced when he moved too quickly. Katherine found herself watching him with increasing concern, and something else she was afraid to name. One evening, as the first snow of winter fell outside, Katherine was sitting by the fire in the main room, mending one of Owen's shirts. He entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might like some," he said, offering her a cup before settling into the chair opposite. "Thank you." She accepted it gratefully, the warmth seeping into her chilled fingers. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the soft click of Katherine's needle through fabric. "Christmas is coming soon," Owen remarked. The ranch hands usually head into town for a celebration at the saloon, but I was thinking we might have our own dinner here, just the two of us. Katherine looked up, surprised by both the invitation and the flutter it caused in her chest. That would be nice. Owen smiled, the firelight casting shadows across his handsome face. You know, I never asked why you were leaving Silver Creek that day. Katherine's hands stilled on her mending. It's not a pleasant story. I'd still like to hear it if you're willing to tell me. Katherine considered her options. In the weeks she had been at the Lyceum, Owen had shown himself to be a kind and honorable man. If she was going to stay, and she increasingly wanted he deserved to know the truth. After my parents died, she began hesitantly, I was sent to live with my uncle in St. Louis. He was not a good man. When I was 18, I fled his house and found myself alone with no money and no prospects. She paused, gathering her courage. A man named James Harrington found me. He was charming, well-dressed, promised to take care of me. Her voice turned bitter. What he really wanted was to groom me for his business. Understanding dawned in Owen's eyes, but he remained silent, letting her continue. For almost 2 years, I worked in one of the most exclusive brothels in St. Louis. Katherine couldn't meet his gaze now, her eyes fixed on the shirt in her lap. When I finally managed to leave, I discovered that a woman in my position has very few options. Every time someone discovered my past, I was forced to move on. She finally looked up, expecting to see disgust or judgment in Owen's expression. Instead, his blue eyes held only compassion. Is that what happened in Silver Creek? Katherine nodded. It always happens eventually. Someone recognizes me or word gets around. Then the whispers start and soon I'm not welcome anymore. Owen was quiet for a long moment. Thank you for telling me, he said finally. It can't have been easy. Aren't you going to ask me to leave? Katherine asked, bewildered by his calm reaction. Owen shook his head. Why would I? The past is the past, Katherine. What matters to me is the woman you are now, kind, hardworking, compassionate. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Since you came to the Lyceum, this place has felt like a home again. I'd like you to stay if you want to. Tears pricked at Katherine's eyes, even knowing what I was. What you were forced to be, Owen corrected gently. There's a difference. Katherine felt a weight she had carried for years begin to lift from her shoulders. Thank you, she whispered. Christmas Eve arrived with a fresh blanket of snow covering the landscape. The ranch hands had departed for town that morning, leaving the house unusually quiet. Katherine had spent the day preparing a special dinner, roasting a chicken and baking an apple pie with precious ingredients Owen had procured from Clearwater. As dusk fell, she set the table with the Montgomery family's best china, which Owen had insisted on using for the occasion. A small pine tree stood in the corner of the room, decorated with paper stars and strings of dried berries that Katherine had made. Owen appeared in the doorway, freshly shaven and wearing his best shirt. His eyes widened as he took in the transformed dining room, with candles flickering on the table and evergreen boughs arranged on the mantel. Katherine, this is beautiful, she smiled, pleased by his reaction. Merry Christmas, Owen. During dinner, they talked and laughed with an ease that surprised Katherine. Owen told stories of his childhood on the ranch, and Katherine shared memories of her parents and the happy years before their deaths. After the meal, Owen insisted on helping with the dishes before leading Katherine to the main room, where the fire burned brightly. I have something for you, he said, retrieving a small package from behind the clock on the mantel. Katherine unwrapped it carefully to find a beautiful silver locket on a delicate chain. Owen, it's lovely. It was my mother's, he explained. She asked me to give it to, he hesitated, to someone special. Katherine's heart quickened as Owen took the necklace from her hands and moved behind her to fasten it around her neck. His fingers brushed against her skin, sending a shiver down her spine. I have something for you too, she said when he moved to face her again. She retrieved a package from beneath the tree and handed it to him shyly. Owen unwrapped it to find a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue wool. "You made this?" he asked, running his fingers over the soft material. Katherine nodded. "I worked on it after you went to bed each night." "It's perfect," he said, wrapping it around his neck. "Thank you." They stood close together, the firelight dancing across their faces. Katherine was acutely aware of Owen's presence, the warmth radiating from his body, the way his eyes seemed to darken as they held her gaze. "Katherine," he said softly, "I know you haven't had many people in your life who valued you for who you truly are. But from the moment I found you on that road, I saw something special in you." He took her hands in his. "You're not defined by your past. You're strong, resilient, and kind despite everything you've endured. You're a treasure, Katherine, my treasure if you'll have me." Tears welled in Katherine's eyes at his words. No one had ever spoken to her with such genuine admiration and affection. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "You deserve everything good in this world," Owen countered, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "And if you'll allow me, I'd like to spend my life giving it to you." He bent his head slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, Katherine closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that felt like coming home. Winter turned to spring, and with the thawing of the land came a blossoming of love between Katherine and Owen. They were married in April in a small ceremony at the ranch, with the ranch hands and a few neighbors as witnesses. Life settled into a happy rhythm, with Katherine continuing to manage the household while Owen worked the ranch. They spent evenings by the fire, planning for the future and sharing dreams they had once thought impossible. In late summer, Katherine discovered she was expecting a child. When she told Owen, his face lit up with such joy that she felt her heart might burst. "A baby," he breathed, placing his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." As her pregnancy progressed, Katherine sometimes found herself plagued by doubts, wondering if she deserved such happiness after her past. Owen seemed to sense these moments and would hold her close, calling her his treasure and reminding her that the past was behind them. One evening in early spring, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Katherine felt a sharp pain that made her gasp. "Owen," she said, clutching her swollen belly. "It's time." The next 12 hours were a blur of pain and determination. With the help of a midwife from Clearwater and Owen's steadfast presence, Katherine gave birth to a healthy baby boy just as dawn broke over the ranch. "He's perfect," Owen whispered, tears streaming down his face as he held his son for the first time. Katherine watched them through exhausted but happy eyes. "What shall we name him?" Owen considered the tiny face, already showing signs of Katherine's green eyes and his own strong chin. "How about James?" Katherine shook her head. "No, not after him," understanding dawned in Owen's eyes. "Of course not. What about Samuel, after my father?" "Samuel Montgomery," Katherine tested the name. "I like it." As the sun rose fully, bathing the room in golden light, Owen placed their son in Katherine's arms and sat beside them on the bed, his arm protectively around his family. "Thank you," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "For what?" "For giving me everything I never knew I wanted." Katherine smiled, looking down at their sleeping son. "I should be thanking you. You saw value in me when everyone else saw shame." "I saw you," Owen said simply. "Just you, Katherine, my treasure." In the years that followed, the Lazy M prospered under Owen's management. Katherine became known throughout the region for her hospitality and kindness, with few aware of her past, and none who cared. Young Samuel grew into a strong, compassionate boy who adored his parents and the ranch that would one day be his. 3 years after Samuel's birth, Katherine gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth, and 2 years later, another son they called Michael. Their family was complete, their happiness full. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, Katherine would sit with Owen on the porch of their home and marvel at how far she had come from that desperate young woman walking alone on a dusty Wyoming road. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked one such evening, his hand warm around hers. Katherine smiled, leaning against his shoulder. I was thinking about how sometimes the thing you're running from leads you exactly where you're meant to be. Owen nodded, understanding as he always did. I thank God every day that you were on that road. As do I, Katherine replied, lifting her face for his kiss. The shame of her past had led her to a treasure far greater than she could have imagined, a man who saw her true worth, children who filled her days with joy, and a life built on love, respect, and second chances. In Owen's eyes, she had never been damaged goods or a fallen woman. She had always been simply his treasure. And that, Katherine knew with absolute certainty, was worth all the hardship that had come before.